Digital Drawing and Painting 101 for beginning animators. I created this character as part of a turnaround cycle for animation. She's the second figure in the cycle. And I created the original turnaround cycle, which is just a very sort of roughly sketched human, actually using mannequins, the wooden mannequins. I just placed them in different positions. I photographed them and then put another layer on top in Photoshop, and using the mannequins as a size and position guide, created this very rough character. I'm going to have a copy of this image on my blog of the mannequins all lined up so you can use it to create your own turnaround character and keep the sizing and proportion the same so that it spins around in an animation. I'm going to adjust the opacity on this movement cycle so that I can barely see it, and then I'm going to create another layer on top of it, and that's the layer in which I'm going to design my character. So I'm just using black. I'll show you in another video how to create animation assets using these. My brush tool, I'm using a Wacom drawing tablet. I have the tablet set to be pressure sensitive for line width, but not for darkness. I want to have a black line whether I press hard or not. The harder I press, the fatter the line is. And I'm using the rough template, but I'm creating a completely original character. The reason why I'm using the template underneath is to get the sizing and the positioning of the person so I can really just focus on developing my character. And as you can see, she looks completely different from the sort of rough, almost robotic person underneath. It's good to use a template, but you don't want to steal another artist's ideas. So I'm going to put in my blog a very rough template that you can use to draw inspiration from, but also the guidelines sheet and the mannequin sheet for you to use. As you can see, I'm using both the pen tool the brush tool and the eraser to draw with. I can go into fatter lines and make them thinner by creating a very fine eraser and going between them. I can create highlights in the eyes and all sorts of details using the eraser. I can also create harder or softer lines just by going to the upper left-hand corner and adjusting my brush. So you can see I'm using the eraser to add in like details like strands of hair and stuff. When you draw the wrists, make sure that when you draw the hands, make sure the hands go in at the wrist and then out at the hand. It does help to draw a mitten shape first and then add the fingers in. And you can always modify it later. That's the nice thing about digital painting. It's like regular painting, only the ink never dries. One thing I like to do is work on more than one figure at a time, especially on the face and some of the distinguishing details. By adding the head at the same time or the hair at the same time to two different figures, you're making sure that they match each other, that it looks like the same character just standing in a different position. I added some material on how heads look in different positions into Google Classroom, and I'll upload those images onto my blog too, so you can use them as a quick reference in drawing a person's head as it turns around in space. There are several excellent tricks that animators use in coloring their drawings. What I did here was I took the magic wand selection tool and I selected the black lines of my figure. Then I created another layer, and once I've created that other layer, I dragged it underneath my drawing and I hit deselect, and then when I went to the layer below and I hit reselect, and that gave me the selection of the lines but in the blank layer below the figure. Then I hit inverse, and instead of the black lines being selected, the rest of the image was selected. So when I color, it stops at the black line, and I'm able to, it makes it much easier for me to keep my color inside the line. The only problem is, as you can see, there's a white space between the black line and the color, and I need to get rid of that. So I'm going to go back to the original layer. I'm going to use the magic wand again, and then I'm going to select the black lines and then extend them. And I've decided to extend it by 3 pixels. Then I'm going to deselect, go back to the layer underneath, reselect, and now it should be perfect. I'm in the layer underneath, and I'm adjusting my brush, and I'm going to start to color, and it's going to hide that little white area because I extended the selection by just a little tiny bit, so it goes right underneath that black line. Let's see that in action. Here I am extending the selection. Then I'm going to deselect. Then I'm going to go to the layer below. And I'm going to reselect. And then I'm going to adjust my brush tool to make it exactly the way I want it. And I'm going to start coloring, and voila, you'll see that the little white area completely disappears. If I do go outside the lines, it's easy enough to just use a hard-edged eraser tool to clean it up. Don't worry about that white. We can put it in another layer later. So I'm going to just go through my person and add the skin color wherever I want, and then I'll select a slightly darker color for the shadows. And then I'm going to add in the color for her tights and her shirt. And then every time I add a color, you pick just a slightly darker version of that color and use it to shade the edges, give it a little bit of a 3D look. And I just use a soft line for that. You can see I did it on the neck, on the face, on the arms, using a soft brush to color. For the hair, I decided to add highlights, so I'm going to do a little bit of yellow for the highlights. And because I'm in the layer underneath the drawing, I'm not messing up any of my original lines. And you'll see how this looks in the end in a minute. I'm just going through with an eraser and cleaning up some of my extraneous lines that I didn't see before. Fixing the hands, any little thing that I don't like about it. And as you go through your figures, you're going to find that each one becomes easier and easier and easier. If you want to match the color from one figure to the next, use the Eyedropper Tool. I wanted to save a JPEG image of just this figure by herself, so I selected all 3 layers, the line layer, the color layer, and the white layer underneath it. All you have to do is hit the Command key and hold it down while you're selecting the 3 layers. 1, 2, 3, and then I copied them, and I drew a rectangular marquee around it, copied it, pasted it into a new file. So eventually I will have a turnaround, not of this sort of wooden looking figure, but of the girl character who I'm creating. This is the sprite sheet that I used as a reference, and here is my finished character. I'll have the finished completed series next time. This is Mrs. Wintenberg, the helpful art teacher.